It is 4th of July weekend, a long weekend, because 4th of July got placed, I guess, very conveniently to turn it into a I think some people, a 5-day weekend. And wonderful, wonderful. The talk today is called Allergic to God. And it's a little bit misleading because not really to God. It's to the word God. Because if we were allergic to God, that would be the most serious autoimmune disorder you could imagine. Get into some more details about that. I want to start off with a little bit of a story. So he asked, is there any way you could close the window? Well, yeah, I can think of a number of ways that I could close the window, but that's probably not what you were asking. Is there any way you can close the window? That's a way of just saying, I'd like to have the window closed. Can you handle that? And what it really means is, could you please close the window? And there are all sorts of reasons that somebody will not say necessarily what they mean. And my first counselor, 20, 30 years ago, took me through this process of being very specific, because we were having a conversation about something. I said something, and she said, "Oh, did you mean this?" And she basically parroted back an interpretation of what and I said, "Well, you know what I meant." She said, "Well, words is important, honey. It's all we got." Because the idea is we will have an idea in our mind, and what we want to do is transfer that idea into somebody else's mind. That is the very nature of communication. So the words are important along the way because we get to say words that are going to plant that new understanding in somebody else's mind. And by the way, it doesn't matter what words we use. So if I can say something that seems to be meaningless, but the person who is hearing it understands and knows what it was that I had in mind, then there is an opportunity for communication to happen. I used to be in the marketing and printing business, and we'd go see a client, and the client would say, I need a brochure. And so we could make them a brochure. Or I need a website, or I need a catalog, and we could make those things for them. But if you stop and you take that to the communication, they're saying that they need a brochure. And I'm going to use a brochure because it's a physical thing. Works with all of it. If you ask why do you need a brochure? Well, because we want people to know about our company. Oh, okay. So you have a brochure, people to know about your company. Why do you want people to know about your company? Well, because then we're going to be able to communicate with them. We'll be able to sell them our products and services. It's like, oh, so you're wanting sales, but you're asking for a brochure. Once you have the sales, what are you going to have? Why do you want the sales? Well, because that's going to bring in revenue. Yada, yada, yada. What do you want the revenue for? Well, you're going to pay everybody. You're going to go home and support our lifestyle. Okay. Well, so what you're trying to do is support your lifestyle, and you came to me saying that you want a brochure. So let's understand there's a big, long arc of what we meant in there so that we can keep our eye on the prize. During the technology work that I was doing in the printing and advertising business, we had workflows that we would devise for here's the process of using the computers to do the page layout and the graphics and the word processing and get the typography all done so that we could then create film that would be made into a printing plate, and that printing plate would then go onto the press and they would print the pages and those would get folded into the brochures. And I was in the intake meetings with clients, I would say, now the reason that we do this is that this is actually the most efficient way that we know of to make the brochure. If we could go out into an empty field at moonlight, in a full moon at midnight, and do a chant and have the brochure show up, we would do that because that would be easier. But the fact is, we don't have to do that. We don't have the chant. We're still working on it. So in the meantime, we're going to use this process that we've devised. And I was noticing as I was coaching my daughter through how to make a threefold brochure that being a digital native, she had never figured out how the pages fold and what it all means. So she's on the phone with me saying, how do I do this? What goes where on the brochure? And I was able to hearken back that there is some arcane knowledge about how to do those sorts of things that perhaps that understanding is gone. I was able to explain it to her very simply because I'd done that so much in my past. The idea, though, is to have an idea of what it is that we want to be experiencing, what we want to be creating, what experience we want to be inviting, and then give voice to that. So words is important. And what we want to do is say what we mean and mean what we say, and understand that with the power of our words to create, we are creating something new. So, an allergy, getting back to the title of the talk, an allergy is a hypersensitivity to something that causes the body to react to it. That's the definition of allergy that doesn't include the word allergen or allergic. Hypersensitivity to something that causes the body to react to it. And in all of the dictionary definitions, there's also the example of a figurative allergy, which is he seems to be allergic to work, or she's allergic to doing homework, or something like that, where it is a resistance. So the term allergic to God, and again, that's the word God, not God itself. I'll get into that in a little bit. The question comes up, what do you mean by God? Because if you mention God and you're talking about a vengeful judge with excess facial hair and anger management issues, then I can understand the resistance that you have to that. If, on the other hand, we understand God to be the one creative power that shares itself as all of creation, love unfolding, revealing itself, that means something very different. And some people, when they hear the word God, are going to think of the vengeful guy in the sky pointing down from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and from even higher up, punishing us for something that we may or may not have done, with rules that have never actually been adequately explained, and with some intermediaries wearing usually long robes and judging us in God's stead or on God's behalf. If that's the God that we're thinking of, then, I don't have anything to do with that. I was having a conversation with somebody, and they said that if you look at the ethics of God and of the devil, you choose the devil. Because God is really mysterious, and you have to figure out what it is that God wants and figure out what God means, and you get judged on what you have done at the end, and then you get rewarded or punished, and you have no idea until that happens what's going on. The other one, you can make a deal with the devil. You know going in what it is that you're giving up, you know what it is that you're getting, and you can make that deal. Now, I'm not recommending that you go make a deal with the devil. I'm just pointing out that as you are engaging with whatever that notion is that you have of a power of good and perhaps a power of evil, that you name it adequately and understand what it is that you're getting into. And the whimsical description that I just had of those two different versions of ethical interactions and behaviors don't apply. Because when I say God, I am not talking about a power outside of us that's making decisions, capricious decisions on our behalf. When I talk about God, I'm talking about that infinite creative power that creates everything and does so by sharing its energy and its substance as love, as whatever it is that is creating. That has created each of us. That's creating everything that exists everywhere. And people say, well, why don't you just say that? It's like, well, I do. It just takes a lot longer than to say God. So as long as the person who I'm talking to understands that the God that I'm speaking of is the God within, then we're able to use that terminology without triggering each other, without causing an allergic reaction, without causing somebody to push away because they're not understanding the ideas that we have in mind. And there are other words that we have sensitivities to, that we are that can be triggers. God is a word that triggers people. The word prayer sometimes triggers people. We don't tend to use the word church. We speak about a celebration. And we don't talk about New Thought Philadelphia as being a church, even though the IRS categorizes us as a church. We are a spiritual community. Because church, for some people, has the implication of a hierarchical organization where there's a person in charge telling us how we have to behave and what it is that we have to do, making rules and pushing people around, quite frankly. And That's not what we mean, so that's not what we say. And we can be a church as far as the IRS is concerned and be a community as far as the rest of us are concerned. Another term is worship. Technically, this would be a worship service. And worship has that implication that we are looking to something outside of ourselves, to something bigger that we're not normally engaged with, and paying attention to that. And that's not what we mean, so we don't even suggest that that's what we're talking about. What we're doing is a spiritual celebration where we are communing and connecting and being part of that one infinite creative power that creates everything. We are acknowledging that that power lives in us. It is us. It shares and expresses itself as us and everything that we're doing. So we say that, even if it takes some extra words, even if there's some shorthand that would make it easier. Other words, prayer, sacrifice. And when you run across somebody who has one of those words or one of those ideas, and they're getting triggered by whatever it is that you're saying, then understand that it's not landing the way that you want it to be landing, and then relanguage it. One of the most powerful techniques that we can use is, golfers call it a mulligan. It's a do-over. It's where, oops, I messed that one up. Can I just try it again? And it is remarkable how likely it is that if you ask for a mulligan, the people who you have, who have bristled at what you just said before, will say, yeah, give it a try. Now, they'll probably remember what you said the first time, so you can't make it completely different or try and walk it back or spin it. But you can start again by saying, what I really meant was, and then try it one more time. And that openness and that connecting a lot of times lets us move closer to being able to say what we mean and mean what we say. Because sometimes we just use language automatically. We say things because that's the way we've always said it, and didn't realize that that's not going to be the most helpful thing in the world. Is there any way you could close the window? Yeah, I could close the window by telling you to close the window, but I don't think that's what you were asking for. Is there any way I can close the window? Well, I can probably throw my shoe at it and maybe it'll slip down, but I don't think that's what you had in mind either. And if the question was, is there any way you can open the window? Well, I could throw something through it, but that's probably also not what you had in mind. So remember that what we're trying to do is get a new understanding in the mind of the person we're communicating with. And that when somebody is communicating with us, the chances are very high that that's what they're trying to do as well. And their words might not be accurate. Now, some of us are very comfortable with freestyle use of language. Some others of us, I see that Breen is smiling, some others of us are much more comfortable being precise in the language that we're using and actually saying what we mean. And then when somebody says, what did you mean by that? We can repeat ourselves because that's actually what I meant. Even though when I say something that's supposed to be clear and somebody says, what do you mean? I'm going to give it another try. I'm going to try explaining it in a different way, in a different manner, because maybe the way that it landed is different than the way that I intended it. I'm going to tie it back around to this being 4th of July weekend. I love being in Philadelphia for Independence Day because everywhere else in the country they say, when the question is, where was the Declaration of Independence written? They say Philadelphia, and here we say 7th and Market Street. And it's the same answer, but it means something different because that's where Thomas Jefferson was when he wrote it. And the man was a wordsmith. He was brilliant with words. And he used some words at the beginning of the Declaration of Independence which are incredibly powerful, and he wanted them to be true even though he knew that they weren't at the time. And we're still trying to live up to what he wrote. And one of my personal favorite literary devices is if you start something by saying, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That really puts the onus on the person who's going to disagree with you, because then they don't have to just disagree with what you're going to say. They have to disagree with the fact that it's self-evident. And then they have to disagree with the fact that it's the truth. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, followed by something that's not true, is a lot more of an argument if somebody wants to disagree with you. And what he said right after that, of course, was, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. And he wanted that to be true. And I'd like that to be true. But I'd like it not just to be the white men, and I'd like it not to just be men. I'd like it to be we are all created equal, because that's, in my mind, what we really mean when we're talking about God. There is that one infinite creative power. In the beginning, there was just the one, whether we call it God, and it was the Garden of Eden, the Genesis story of let there be light, and there was light, or the Big Bang, where there was a singularity that began expanding, and has, in either case, that one has continued to evolve and unfold and reveal itself and become more and more rich and complex as all of creation. In the beginning, there was only the one. That one is the creator, the source. And everything that exists everywhere is that source expressed in its own way. So we are all created equal. And that is a self-evident truth. As soon as we understand the premise that there is only one, it is obvious that we are all aspects of the one. And all of the good that's available anywhere is available everywhere, and it's available to us. We are free to claim it and own it and be it. So let's turn away from our allergies and claim our independence, our freedom from any thinking that we've had that we are somehow lacking or limited, or there's some force outside of ourselves that's holding us back or holding us down or keeping us from having something. The good is at hand right now. And I'm not talking about some hand of the infinite reaching down from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I'm talking about these hands here. You have them. The good is at hand right now. And you are loved. So it is.